Hello and welcome to TSYS Merchant Solutions webcast of an educational brief. Today we are super excited to talk to you about kind of a difficult topic, which is disputes and chargebacks. However, we're going to give you some tips that you can afford to avoid as a business owner dealing with these difficult situations of chargebacks and disputes. We are very fortunate today to have Renee Colfiel with us. Renee has over 22 years of experience in the industry, working both in investigations and chargebacks and disputes. So today, before we get started, I want to say, Renee, I'm so glad that you're here and thank you for taking the time to work with these business owners on chargebacks and disputes. You know, this is a really frustrating thing for a business owner. What can you do and what can you tell us about the chargeback process?
Well, Kim, first let me just thank you for that great introduction. Today we can just talk about really some chargeback tips and tools that will help merchants, not lose their merchandise as well as not lose a chargeback. All chargebacks are, subject to different criteria. However, there are some tips and tools that we can give the merchants that will help them prevent their chargebacks.
Great. Let's start with what is a chargeback?
Well, a chargeback is when a credit card transaction has posted to the cardholder's account and the merchant has been paid for that transaction. The chargeback is the result of the cardholder charging that transaction back.
Well, chargebacks happen for a lot of different reasons that I know. What are, some of the reasons that usually trigger a dispute?
Many chargebacks are triggered by customer disputes where there's an issue with the services or the product that they've purchased. It could be potential fraud where maybe they just really don't recognize the merchant's name on their statement. Credit card processing errors, which could be the transaction posted twice to their account, or authorization issues, meaning that there was either a declined authorization or the merchant failed to obtain an authorization on that transaction.
Tell us a little bit about the chargeback life cycle and how it works from a business owner and cardholder perspective.
The chargeback life cycle starts when the transaction actually posts to the cardholder's account. The cardholder notices that there is an unusual transaction on their statement, and then they contact their card issuing bank. Their card issuing bank then charges back that transaction along with some supporting documentation to the acquirer. The acquirer then contacts the merchant to let them know that there is a potential dispute, and at the same time, that payment that the merchant was given is now taken away. The merchant then has the opportunity to provide us with some supporting documentation to prove that the dispute is either invalid or he has remedied it prior to the chargeback.
Wow, Renee, that's really a lot of steps through a process, and a lot of places where there's cardholder, issuer, acquirer, and business owner steps that need to be done. It can be a very intensive process. Well, let's talk about who's involved in that process and what the steps are that each of them use.
Well, we have the cardholder who sees the transaction posting to their statement, and they're generally the ones who initiate the chargebacks. There's the card issuer. They issue the credit cards to the customers, and in some cases, the cardholder is not even aware of the dispute because the dispute is being generated by their card issuing bank.
Are you kidding me? So explain those to me. I think those are the ones that probably cause some of the most frustration for a business owner because they've gotten an approval, for instance, maybe an authorization that's been approved, and then there's something that went wrong in that process, and the cardholder's not even, who might be a regular customer, walks in and says, "What are you talking about? I didn't ask for my money back," but their issuing bank is asking for that money back. What happens in those instances, Renee?
Correct. The card issuing bank, when they don't know, when the cardholder is not involved in the dispute, what happens is usually it's an authorization related transaction where the card has been statused and there's no authorization available. It could be points of duplicate processing where the bank is actually seeing that the transaction posted twice to their cardholder statement, which results in them issuing a chargeback without the cardholder's knowledge. So you're correct, Kim, that in some cases the merchants say that, well, I've talked to the cardholder and they have no idea that this is being disputed or even why it's being disputed.
Wow. Okay, great. Let's talk through this. Let's talk through how they resolve the chargeback without actually losing the sale. What are the steps that they can do? Can you take us through these steps?
Sure. The steps for merchants not to lose the sale is when you receive notification of a chargeback, you need to respond immediately. Granted, all documentation does have a respond by date, but the sooner you provide your response back to us as your acquirer, the better chances are that you can win that dispute. And when you're responding to the chargebacks, one of the key things is to make sure that you provide clear, legible documentation. You also want to supply information to prove that the true cardholder participated in the transaction, that the cardholder received the goods or services, or that you've made every effort to resolve the issue with the customer prior to a chargeback. And one of the other things is that I'd like to point out is that in most cases, you as a merchant, you know your business, you know what's going on in your business, and when you respond to that dispute, your information should be clear so that the card issuing bank as well as your acquirer can really understand that information. And again, you want to act promptly. You want to deliver a refund if you are issuing a refund to the customer. Make sure you do it in a timely manner. If you're delivering merchandise to your customer, just make sure that you are communicating with your customer that the merchandise will be delivered in a timely manner. You want to immediately inform your customers of a refund. If it's going to take 7 days, give your cardholders that notification that it's going to take 7 days for your refund to post to your account, just so they're aware and they don't run out and request a chargeback. So the more information you can provide us, the better chances you have of resolving that without losing the sale.
Renee, you mentioned a time frame. Exactly how long does a business owner have to respond to that, and how long should they have to hold on to their documentation before a cardholder might dispute a transaction?
Kim, that's a great question. We get that question quite frequently. Cardholders have up to 120 days to initiate a dispute, and within that 120-day time frame, once the chargeback comes in, the card brands give us 45 days to respond to that dispute. And it generally takes 30 days to dispute the chargeback. So merchants, once you receive that debit notification, generally you have 23 to 30 days to get your documentation back to us so we can get it back to the card brands, back to the issuing bank. And in most cases, it takes 75 days to resolve the chargeback, and that's for it to go through its complete chargeback cycle.
That's a pretty long time frame for, is a business owner out their money the whole time, or is it fluctuating? But what happens to their funds during that time frame?
Well, the funds are fluctuating back and forth. Once with the reversal, the merchant has been debited, so those funds have been taken out of his account. But once we reverse the chargeback, the merchant's account is then credited while the card issuing bank is reviewing the documentation.
Okay, Renee, I mean, there's some real and unreal costs to a business owner, including their time, fulfillment, lost goods, and then some basic fees that they pay when they get a dispute. This next slide is going to take us to, I think, the heart of what we're trying to get to here, which is what are the best practices? What can they do to actually prevent that loss of money and time and effort that goes with a dispute?
Well, Kim, for card-present transactions, the key thing is for the merchants to swipe the card, make sure they obtain an authorization, and above all, know the warning signs of card-present fraud. If the customer is making a large purchase without care of size, color, or price, might be some warning signs of fraud. Also, if the customer is coming in early to make a large purchase, or 2 minutes before you close the store, might be some indications of warning fraud.
Great. And for card not present businesses, it changes the game a little bit, but what should they watch out for?
For card not present fraud, merchants need to make sure that they are obtaining an authorization on every transaction. Use the address verification system to get the address match. Provide the card verification value. Call the customer or email the customer to verify the order. Include your phone number in your customer service field. And again, know the warning signs of card not present fraud. Know if it's an unusual purchase that doesn't meet your standard requirements of cost. Using multiple cards for one transaction. Having merchandise shipped overseas. Again, knowing your business model, knowing what your average ticket is, and if the sale exceeds that, be cautious.
Absolutely. I think you and I have worked on a couple cases together where if it really seems too good to be true, it is. And they need to know their customer and know their business and just trust. When things are out of that, they need to question it a little bit more.
Right, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, here's some things that we can expect to see in 2013. I don't want to go over this in a lot of detail. I mean, the basic thing is that those card brands are streamlining the process. They're going to make those timeframes that we discussed earlier shorter, and they're going to make it easier for a customer or a business owner to respond to a chargeback.
Correct. And one of the key things is that they are going to be really looking at compelling information, which is information that you as a merchant provide back to us that would require the card issuing bank or the cardholder to address the issues that you've pointed out in relation to the chargeback.
That's good news for merchants, absolutely. Renee, let's talk about the things that TSYS Merchant Solutions does to help our customers resolve these chargebacks and to prevent them from happening. First off, I know before we ever send a dispute out the door, we do everything in our systems and in our power to try and reverse those back to the card brands or to the issuing banks. So if they're getting a dispute from us, we've already taken one step trying to help them out. What are some other things that we can do to help our customers?
Absolutely, Kim. What we do is we try to provide industry-specific and chargeback training to the customers. We provide a special chargeback call center that allows merchants to call and speak with an experienced chargeback rep. We provide pre-notification on our chargebacks by sending out a chargeback sales draft request that gives the merchants the opportunity to respond to a chargeback before it's debited to their account. And we also provide special handling requests.
And just want to tell you thank you so much for everything that you've done and the tips that you've provided today. Again, if you guys have questions, we know chargebacks can be really confusing and frustrating. On our website, TSYSmerchantsolutions.com, there's tons of information and more tips available. You can also visit TSYS Payment Perspectives, where we are running different articles, and a lot of those involve chargebacks and have the latest information on what's going on in the industry there. We thank you for taking the time today, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you, Kim. This has been a pleasure to do this.